Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching World Talks here on TVP World. On Friday, all eyes will be focused on Alaska, where U.S. President Donald Trump will host Russian President Vladimir Putin for talks on how to end the war in Ukraine. But today, leaders in Europe had their eyes focused online as European leaders met amongst themselves to discuss a strategy to have some input on Friday's meeting, as well as direct talks with Donald Trump himself today in a last-ditch attempt to influence a potential offer that may or may not be on the table for Vladimir Putin. And now joining me to discuss is TVP World's Europe editor, Marcin Zaborowski. Hello, Marcin.
Hello, Don. Thank you for having me.
Yes, this looks like a big week, a pivotal week. This could be, potentially, or, well, it might end with absolutely nothing there in Alaska. But today's meeting in Berlin, do you think that this was the final chance for the Europeans to express their dearest concerns to the U.S. president ahead of this summit coming up on Friday?
I'm not sure it was really about concerns. I think it was mostly about, it was a chance to coordinate. The meeting is happening in 2 days' time, so very, very soon. We had a group of European leaders, including pivotal countries like this one, Finland, but also the big three other European nations, United Kingdom, Germany and France and so on. And it's clear that the diplomacy is to be settled between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. These are the two men who will have to define the conditions for the ceasefire. Not so much for the peace, because this is something which is long-term, but no ceasefire would be holding without Europe's contribution, because a ceasefire would need to have some kind of a form of security guarantees. Security guarantees means really presence on the ground, military presence on the ground, provided by the Europeans in Ukraine.
If we look at the headlines, if we dig into the stories that have been coming out of Washington and various European capitals as of recently, how far apart do you think that the two sides really are? Because if we look at the Russian demands, they haven't changed all that much. The only, sway of the needle, if you will, is the potential talk for Ukraine to abandon its positions in the Donbass, in exchange for Russia's withdrawal from Sumy and from the Kharkiv regions. So maybe this area they've come a little bit closer to, but everything else is essentially all the things that have been non-starters for Ukraine.
I think what we know is what's in the public space, and what's in the public space. We are, as you said yourself, we are pretty much in the same positions as we were, months and years ago. Ukraine is still, despite some setbacks on the front line, is still holding quite firmly in the east and the south. And it has, Ukraine announced it very clearly through President Zelenskyy that they will not be prepared to make territorial concessions, certainly not on the legal nature. And that was a point also stressed by the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who also said there will be no recognition of territorial changes by in a lawful manner. Yeah? We could recognize a status quo as it is, but without actually saying that that the boundaries, the borders of the country change. The Russians are also coming into the negotiations saying that we have our own constitution. Our own constitution says that these Ukrainian regions are now Russian. So we are not going to negotiate that. So this is a kind of a classic posturing on both sides, saying we are not going to budge on anything really. Yeah? It's only the Americans who are saying, oh, maybe some land swap could be a road path to peace. But neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians have endorsed this idea in public.
Right. Now, NATO's Rutte, after a virtual meeting on Ukraine, Do you think that his attempts to bring Trump, they've called Mark Rutte the Trump whisperer before, do you think his attempts to bring Trump closer to what the Europeans want to see and what Ukraine wants to see will be successful or potentially fail?
Mark Rutte indeed has the ear of President Trump. Apparently, there are two leaders like that. It's Mark Rutte, the current Secretary General of NATO, and the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Mr. Starmer. If these people are whispering something in Donald Trump's ear, he's likely to listen. That's what we've been told through numerous sources, including from General McMaster, Trump's former national security advisor. So Rutte seems a very constructive but also sometimes overly optimistic person, and he seems to suggest that there are conditions for some kind of a peace shaping up. That remains to be seen. But he's certainly right by pointing out that unity, transatlantic unity, is essential here. So, and I think that we achieved that with that meeting that just happened today. That both the Europeans and the Americans didn't disagree in public. It looks like that the conditions are still to be determined. They both said that we talk to each other, and that Europeans and the Ukrainians are saying that we think that President Trump understands us and is supporting our position.
And the White House earlier kind of downplayed these talks, trying to probably hedge its bets on the outcome by saying this is a listening exercise for Donald Trump to see whether peace is possible. Yes. Yet other unnamed officials have reportedly said that potentially Donald Trump may make a peace offer to Vladimir Putin to get to that ceasefire. Is Donald Trump only simply interested in getting a ceasefire for the sake of getting the Nobel Peace Prize? Or do you think that these legitimate concerns that the Europeans and the Ukrainians have will be a part of this decision-making process?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it's certainly true that Donald Trump seems to be more determined than anybody else in having this war ended. Because he promised that would happen during his campaign. The war is a distraction. Is also a dividing factor in the United States. So he's initially, for his first months in office, he was saying we just need to do whatever we can to have this war ended. And he thought somehow that Ukraine, by his offering its resistance, was an obstacle in that. But then he spoke to Vladimir Putin through intermediaries. There have been various trips by Special Envoy Witkov and another Special Envoy Kellogg. And I think that now Donald Trump seems to have understood that Vladimir Putin has been misleading him, and that Russia does not really want peace. Russia wants to have territorial concessions, and it actually wants to control the entire Ukraine. It doesn't even want to say what it wants in order to have peace.
What do you think Vladimir Putin wants to get out of this trip in Alaska? Why do you think he's engaging with President Trump and going for this when the two sides really are still so far apart?
Well, when after a number of months, I think that Donald Trump understood that Russia does not really want peace, and that seems to got him annoyed. And him being annoyed means that he started to bring up the argument about sanctions and secondary sanctions. And secondary sanctions, if they were being implemented, that would mean that the Chinese and Indian and Brazilian companies, which are allowing Russia to continue with its war effort by purchasing the energy which the Europeans are no longer buying, if these companies were to be sanctioned by the United States, that would really hurt Russia. And that is something which made Vladimir Putin listen. And he's clearly playing now for time. He wants to have a situation whereby the United States drops the threat of sanctions, or at least delays that, the implementation of these sanctions.
Well, right. And what are the future of sanctions at this point? Do you think it's going to be based on the outcome of this meeting, whether Trump is satisfied with the, I guess, goodwill that Russia shows in these talks, or?
Well, I think that Trump needs to get some kind of assurance that Russia at least is negotiating goodwill, and it's not just playing for time. And you know, after all, Donald Trump wrote even a book about negotiations, and he's been negotiating on many occasions. He should know, he should be able to recognize when he is actually talking to somebody who is negotiating goodwill rather than playing for time.
Some people have, compared this upcoming meeting to, a critical juncture in, 1938, when times were very different, yet the same. Are the consequences of this meeting with Vladimir Putin the same as, say, when Neville Chamberlain, signed off on Czechoslovakia?
Well, let's just remind everyone, in 1938, Czechoslovakia was essentially abandoned by the Western allies. France and the United Kingdom and the other countries were also not very helpful. So Czechoslovakia was left on its own. And it was a terrible mistake which led to the outbreak of a war eventually, because Hitler was not satisfied with Czechoslovakia. He wanted then Poland, then he wanted other things, and he would never stop. And Vladimir Putin is like that too. We know that he will not stop. So he got Crimea, and the rest of the world was kind of de facto prepared to say, oh, well, maybe that would shut him up. It wasn't enough, and he started the war. Now, Donald Trump thought that if we offer him recognition, de facto recognition of territorial concessions in Donbass, maybe it would let him go. Maybe he would just stop the war. But now I think that Donald Trump and the rest of the American public understands that actually Putin will not stop, that he will continue. So in that respect, Czechoslovakia, 1938 and today are similar. What is different is that now Europeans are with the Ukrainians, and Ukrainians are not on their own.
Well, let's hope that continues to be the case. Marcin Zaborowski, our Europe editor here at TVP World, thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thanks for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.